Welcome, everyone. I call the October 16, 2024 Planning Commission meeting to order. The main purpose of tonight's meeting is to conduct a study session on the 2024 Comprehensive Plan, associated development regulation amendments. Before we move on to the agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our hybrid meeting format. The City of Bothell is providing the option to attend this meeting either in person or remotely via Zoom. For those participating via Zoom, the chat and question functions are not available to ensure compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. We have a public comment agenda item at the beginning of the meeting. This time is for comments on issues not scheduled for hearing on tonight's agenda. Please limit these comments to 3 minutes. Please note that the City of Bothell does not tolerate verbal harassment. Please remember this during your comments. Public comment will be allowed both in person and via Zoom. Those wishing to comment via Zoom were asked to submit an online form by 3 p.m. today. People wishing to submit written comments were also asked to submit those comments by 3 p.m. Email was encouraged as well and will be acknowledged. Those in attendance may also make comments and have been asked to indicate their desire to comment on the sign-in sheets. The Imagine Bothell notice, city website, and tonight's agenda all provided information to the public for providing comments. Video of this meeting will be streamed live as well as recorded and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone and listen live to the meeting. For our phone-in callers, during staff presentations, staff will make every effort to specify which materials they are referencing so that everyone can follow along. At this point, we'll take a moment to acknowledge the attendance of the commissioners. Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Commissioner Westerbeck.
Here.
Commissioner Lieber.
Here.
Commissioner Robson.
Here.
Commissioner Sills.
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Here. Thanks.
All commissioners are present and accounted for. In addition, Deputy Director Gates, Deputy Public Works Director Morikawa, and Jesse Hartman from Burke Consulting are in attendance. Lastly, before we begin, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly and pause frequently. State your name each time before speaking. Mute your microphone when not speaking. If you are streaming the live video feed, please turn the sound off as there is a delay. For commissioners, at specific breaks in the presentation, I will be calling on members who wish to speak or ask a question. If you want to speak, please indicate this by raising your hand. I will call on you as soon as I see you. This will avoid the problem of having 2 people speaking at the same time. Identify yourself before you ask a question, make a motion, second a motion, or participate in debate. And please mute your microphone when not speaking. First item on the agenda is public comment. City has accepted visitor comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. We do not have anyone in the audience, and we did not receive any written comments as of 3 p.m. Is there anyone in the Zoom? No one in Zoom, so no public comments this evening. We will move on. The first item is the approval of the September 13 and October 3rd minutes. We did table the September 18 minutes, and Deputy Director Gates has some comments on that after they're introduced. So is there a motion to approve September 18?
Commissioner Lever, motion to approve.
Okay. Is there a second? Well, why don't you second? Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Mr. Westbeck seconds. Deputy Director Gates, you had a comment we tabled because of a question about a link.
Yeah, there was a question about the Zoom link on the minutes for the September 18th meeting. Staff did check that. The link has been confirmed to work. I know sometimes when a Zoom link or a Teams link or any other virtual meeting link, it might not work initially. Sometimes it could be the platform, could be just a glitch. So we have confirmed that those links are consistently accurate. And I know that I've had the issue before with any number of meetings that I've tried to join. Just try it again. So we have confirmed that it does take you to the right spot.
Okay, so with that clarification, any other discussion on the September 18th minutes? Commissioner Robson?
Thank you, Chair. I just noted that it says that our statement to council is attached, and I didn't see it attached. I wasn't sure if you meant attached to the minutes or,
I do believe it was attached on the
other form.
October 3rd, at the October 3rd meeting, so yes.
Okay, got it. It was there somewhere.
was there,
Okay, just
yeah.
double checking. Thank you.
All right. So any other comments on the September 18 minutes? Seeing none. All in favor of approving? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all commissioners are in favor, so the September 18 minutes are approved. And I'll note that that was the first tabled motion I've seen at the commission, so learning experience. We now have before us the October 3rd meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the October 3rd minutes? Commissioner Sills.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, it's been moved. We approve the October 3rd minutes. Is there a second?
Commissioner Lever, second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the October 3rd minutes. Any discussion around the October 3rd minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the October 3rd minutes, please say aye.
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 All right. The October 3rd minutes are approved. With that, we move on to our study session on the 2024 Comprehensive Plan Associated Development Regulation Amendments. And Deputy Director Gates, I assume you'll lead us on this?
Yeah, let me just get this opened up here.
All right.
Okay, so we are going to recap a little bit and seek your final feedback and clarification on the draft zoning regulations associated with the comp plan updates. We're looking to make sure that we answer any questions and can provide City Council with your feedback at this point for their November 5th meeting. What I'm going to do tonight is run through a bit of a brief review based on conversations that happened last week at City Council. So a lot of this is very fluid, and we're just wanting to make sure that we are answering your questions, their questions, kind of answering their questions through the Planning Commission conversations. Then we'll do some review of the density dimensional standards. I want to talk about the future land use map and the zoning map and how they're related as we build that final zoning map. And then upcoming schedule and questions and feedback there. So the development regulation review wanted to make sure that we're very, very clear on the required and then some optional proposals. So the required items are all of those that would need to align with recent legislation, would need to align with the draft or the proposed preferred alternative for the future land use map so that we can achieve those required density targets. And those are on the top up there, most of them. I did not include every single one, but it's, impact fees for accessory dwelling units, a few updates to definitions, adding the unit lot subdivision, the temporary emergency housing, and then the mixed-use overlays, which again align with the job creation numbers for that work with the future land use map. The optional items, neighborhood scale retail or the corner store topic, things like circle lot diameter, and then the manufactured home park, switching it from an overlay to a zone. Not necessarily required, but it is something that we just want to make sure we can, if need be, things can be tabled in the optional category to next year. And that is what staff is planning on doing, is taking some of the items to next year that live in our kind of ongoing amendment list. It just became too big to wrap in to this year. We really just want to focus on what is required, and then a few of those very, very clear updates. So last week at City Council, if you caught the meeting, there was some conversation around lot size and density, trying to clarify, similar to the conversations that we had here about a minimum and a maximum. Should there be a minimum? Should the minimum be raised? Is the maximum set right? And I'm going to go through those tables briefly just so that it refreshes everyone's memory here. We talked about lot coverage or site coverage and where those numbers came from. Questions came up around those, so I want to make sure we get clarity on that. Floor area ratio within the overlay zones. And then a few questions about setbacks and how we landed on those. And then we started to talk about residential scale retail, realizing that it's a large topic potentially with many, many thoughts on what a definition could be, and we just want to make sure that we are giving it its necessary time to work through. It's in the comp plan. This would typically be one of those items where you'd update your comprehensive plan, and then within the first 6 months of the following year, you would establish those development regulations, taking that time to make sure you study it and provide those updates. So I'm going to run through these really quick. There is one change here based on that conversation with council, where we talked about very little differentiation between the RL1 and RL2 and even the RM1. So what we have here is a proposed shift to the maximum to create some variability in between the RL1 and 2, as well as that RM1, to give those tiers of maximum densities, all within the ranges that were part of the future land use map. And those assumptions, it works within those assumptions for redevelopment. We kept the minimum density as proposed based on the conversation here and based on how it seemed to land with City Council. So what we want to make sure from you all tonight is that adjusting the maximum base density within the RL2 and RM1 makes sense. So that is our first question that we have for you, and happy to pause and kind of run through this, as I know it can create a lot of questions.
Commissioners, questions, comments? So I've got a question. So there are no minimums on those two. You've raised the maximum, but you're not proposing a minimum on RL2 or RM1?
Correct. Keeping those without a minimum, understanding that they are shifting from a current lower density, and that redevelopment process provides the option and sort of a range of 1 unit up to 12 or up to 25, not establishing that minimum there.
Commissioners? Commissioner Jones and then Commissioner Westerbeck.
Thank you. This is Commissioner Jones. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm zooming in on a phone.
Yes.
So thank you. So I'm going to ask basically the same question I asked last time. Could you just go over the pros and cons of including a minimum versus not including a minimum, and why they're set this way?
Well, I mean, one of the pros, it's kind of goes both ways. If you set a minimum, you're encouraging some higher density development in those areas. If you set a minimum, there's a little less flexibility for people who do want to develop there. I would say the minimums become more important as you get into the higher density ones, which is why we have them there, to help encourage that density where as close to the services and transit as possible. But we've tried to maintain some flexibility in the less dense zones. I'm not sure what else to add to that right now, but
If I could just follow up really quickly. So that is very helpful. I believe last time you said that in order for us to get to where we need to get to in terms of the growth targets, we actually need the max density, which is listed in column 3. So could you explain the benefits of having a minimum density in the RM2 onwards? And why that particular level? I mean, how did you get to 25 when we really need to be at 50? I do understand that lot sizes, there might be some difficulties just from topography and things like that. But I'm just curious as to why this, what are the pros of setting it at 25 and 30, et cetera?
Feel free to jump in at any point here, but we started with just kind of 50% of what the maxes are to give a decent range there, and also recognize that those are all a jump from what the current densities allowed are. Do you have a? I just want to also add, I think council were they pretty set on these densities as well? So we, I know we came to you with both options last time, and it seemed like from planning commission and council, this is where folks were leaning.
And I'll just add real quick, they're based on the recommended ranges from Commerce and how to build this out and base it on it's based on the assumptions of redevelopment throughout the city. So part of what every jurisdiction is going to be considering is within our first 5 years of this new comp plan, these new comp plan policies, the zoning that's going along with it, measuring what our trajectory is, and are we too low or are we too high, and being able to adjust, understanding that these don't happen overnight. These do take time to go through, the permitting and the review and the construction process. And so we will be, as will every city, be monitoring how development aims for those targets, those required targets. And we built into the capacity we built into the plan more capacity, but we set these maximums at what that target should achieve.
Based upon which state laws?
A point of clarification too is just that these are, I believe these maximum densities are based on our kind of likely redevelopment. So when we were looking at the growth, we would expect the growth it would need to develop at those densities to hit your targets. Like Christian was saying, there is more capacity in the land use map if you need to adjust and find you're not close to that. We don't really know what growth will do in, 6 months, a year, 5 years. So there might be more, there might be a little bit less, but it gives you that opportunity to adjust still. And then increasing the max densities in the RL2 and RM1 would actually give you even just a little bit more wiggle room, because now we've created a little bit more possibility for density in those areas.
Thank you. I think the gist of it is that it's giving us some flexibility while still getting us as close as we need to get to in terms of the targets. I think that's what I'm hearing.
That sounds right. Thank you for succinctly summarizing.
Okay, Commissioner Westerbeck and then Commissioner Sills.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I watched the council meeting last Tuesday, and you had mentioned this a minute ago, and I want to see if I got this right. Was it the mayor or someone was asking about why we had RL2 and RM1 both, because they were really close on the spectrum? Yeah. So kind of curious about that, but I mean, we've definitely got a density difference. Interesting thing to me that stuck out there is, the RL2s are derived from larger lot sizes, or I guess still have larger lot sizes, although they have half the density. But we have a lot of lots that size in the city. So kind of makes me wonder, maybe that question was germane that they brought up. maybe the RL2 should also be 25 because you actually have larger lots. They could take more units. I mean, we get more units, of course, as it gets more dense, where we have the smaller lot sizes as we go down towards RM4, which is logical. But just kind of throw a monkey wrench in there. The RL2s could take that higher density really easily because they're large. And I know why we're not in RC, and then maybe lesser so in RL1, but just tossing that out. I can't remember, were they suggesting we just kind of merge the two? Yeah, because there is a subtle jump between them, it's true. Some more comments than questions, I guess. But I can't say they weren't good questions that they brought up. I thought they were.
Commissioner Sills, then Commissioner Robson.
I just have a really basic question. Is current density, that's the current max?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And, but typically at these different levels, what is the current density? It's 1, right? Is that the average? Like, what's the average of each of these? Do we have that?
The average current density units per acre
Yeah,
for the existing zones.
yeah. Specifically the ones we're talking about that we're proposing no minimum.
Right. We'd have to pull that unless you know that. Yeah.
It's fair to
Well,
guess, though, it's like
Yeah,
one
it's
something, right?
9,600 square foot lot goes into an acre 4.5 times. And so that's not an unusual lot size in Bothell. That's kind of big. 8,400, have to do the math, but it's probably 6 or 7 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do some calculations based on the lot sizes, but we haven't looked at what the actual average of what's developed today in those, on
Okay.
those lots.
Yeah, that's just the theoretical math there. That's the basic arithmetic.
Commissioner Robson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to build off of Commissioner Westerbeck's comment and just verify my understanding here. When it says proposed max base density units per acre, even though we're having larger lots in L1 and L2, we're talking about 12 per acre. So it doesn't matter the size of the lot. We're going per acre regardless of what zoning level here. Is that correct? So bigger lots wouldn't really make a difference because it's per, in the sense that, we could fit more in L2 being 12. If we were to bump it up to 25, we'd be in a totally, because the our L2 is a bigger lot size. It doesn't matter the lot size, it's just the density that we're focused on here. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
We take the lot size of the subject property and then establish how many units per
The
acre
measurement, okay.
based on that.
Okay, yes, thank you.
ratio. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other commissioner comments, questions? Seeing none, proceed.
All right. Really just want to touch on what City Council brought up about hard surface coverage, the proposed and current. So these were based off of what guidance identified, and there's really no perfect way to say it should be 71% or 72%. It's looking at kind of what those densities would be allowed, what densities would be allowed, and then establishing what that proposed maximum would be. Adding into it those accessory building coverage for those lower density areas, and establishing something that creates a footprint for the proposed building coverage. So the item on the left of the proposed column, that could accommodate the density within those zones.
Commissioner Robson.
Thank you, Chair. Can I So underneath proposed and current, there are two numbers. Can you, what are the two different numbers? I'm sorry.
The number on the left of of that proposed column is the total building coverage. So that's the building footprint, the foundation of the building. On the right there, it's the hard surface coverage. So that's your walkways, driveway, everything else that is not permeable landscaping.
And if I could just do a follow-up, as we increase the hard surface coverage, are there then SEPA requirements that people have to meet as these are as people meet these different things? Is there an upgrade in SEPA that they need to incorporate to their plan?
SEPA would still be reviewed based
still
on
have to-
those thresholds, right? Yes, for how much parking, how many new units you're proposing. Yes, those thresholds would still be applied.
Jump up along with these adjustments, their amount of appropriate drainage or those kinds of things. Those also would correlate in different mitigation factors to account for increased stormwater, thank you, increased stormwater REMA. I think that's SEPA, right? That gives mandatory mandates for how to mitigate that kind of stuff, right?
Development regulations, stormwater
Is it
regulations.
Stormwater regulations? Okay.
Yeah,
I was thinking
most-
environmental protection, but,
Most mitigation is achieved through development regulations such as
Okay.
stormwater codes, critical area buffers,
Okay.
those types of things. But the threshold of a project size
I see.
will determine if a SEPA review is required.
I see.
Where we would analyze all of those criteria.
Environmental impacts. So how they'll have to adjust to mitigate some of the increased stormwater or, I don't know, parking lot runoff or something like that. That's also, the requirements for what they'll have to implement will be increased if we increase to the proposed numbers. Is that correct? I'm not making any sense.
I think I understand what you're saying, but the stormwater regulations would still apply, and so just the way that they would regulate things like stormwater or any of the kind of other requirements in the code would just change a little bit. Right, so you might not mitigate on site in the same way. I am not a stormwater expert, let me just say that.
Sure.
Yeah,
Right.
you might be able to mitigate more on site if you have more kind of green space or just not hard surface, so permeable surface. And if you have more hard surface and less permeable, you're going to have to mitigate in other ways. But the protections are still in place.
Right, okay, and you might have to do, okay. I think I understand. Thank you so much for your patience.
So I'm a ways from deep familiarity with that, but my understanding is that you can't increase the peak flow off a parcel with development. So with more hard surfaces, you'd require more retention, and that would be in the stormwater code. So that wouldn't be, anything else. It's already there. Whatever the runoff is now is what it's got to be. But if you put
increased runoff, you need to do increased.
you need to store it and then meter it out.
That's exactly it. Thank you very much. That's exactly, the increase will parallel the wind increase.
Correct. And to my understanding, and again, I'm a little out.
And none of what we are proposing supersedes any other development requirement that exists, whether it's building code, fire code, stormwater standards. They still have to all be met. And so it's a puzzle to make sure, even if you can do 80% of total coverage, you might have to dial that down depending on site conditions and what the other codes are requiring.
Commissioner Westerbeck?
If no one else is waiting. I'm glad we're talking about this because this is something I do all the time in the last 20 years. And it's always been peculiar to me because I'm always working with the building coverage, hard surface, impervious surface coverage. And 20, even 15 years ago, we didn't use civil engineers on small projects much. And it's become where now you've got to hire a civil engineer for almost any project. And that's really just to deal with stormwater and site improvements and stuff too, especially for small commercial. But if we're now at a point where stormwater and civil engineering is required for every project, I can't see why you wouldn't just say they're all 80, 90, but you have to meet the stormwater code, the King County stormwater code and the Bothell stormwater codes. Because there's, very specific manuals, we use. And at that point, the stormwater code tells you, you can't do 60%. You're going to have to do 58 or something like that, or 55, because whether you're using LID, low impact development, or you're putting it out in the street in the stormwater system, whatever you're permitting, that's the governing relationship. That's the governing, principle for that site. So you've got natural limits. So to me, this is sort of arbitrary, or just makes me wonder, why is it because we're trying to keep a suburban ideal, or dictate green space? Because if you've got an engineer on every project, they can figure out how to deal with the stormwater, and that will dictate. So kind of reverse engineering. If stormwater is going to govern, building coverage and hard surfaces kind of vibes.
Yeah, and real quick, some of these are, they're intended to align with tree retention, canopy growth, canopy retention, and keeping that aspect on site, and finding that balance.
But if we're saying, we're going to have a tree code, or we already do, you've got to mitigate by replacing, so much tree with so much new tree. We've got a stormwater code, and so we're starting to deal with all the site issues in that way. Then this is sort of an overlay, like, oh, also, you can only use this so much of the site. And then we're trying to also meet minimum densities that are going to start to push these a bit. Just makes me wonder. I mean, I know it's unprecedented, but it seems like it's just, it's like another topic we'll probably get to eventually. If you have height, setbacks, lot coverage, maximums, and you also have FAR, there's sort of two systems that are doing the same exact thing that are redundant. And I feel like we got a little bit of redundancy. You got a stormwater code you have to adhere to, you got tree codes and everything, but you can also use only so much of the site. So to me, it's more about, it harkens back to really the exclusionary zoning we put into place as a culture 100 years ago, and this is sort of vestiges of that. Not sure we're going to change that overnight, but I just want to get it out there because we got some redundancy in our systems.
All right, other commissioner comments? Commissioner Sills.
Maybe I missed it, but what is the note below removal of maximum accessory building coverage?
So there was a maximum coverage that a accessory building, so a detached shed, garage, could not exceed. That's wrapped into just the overall calculation limitation there.
So the accessory building footprint would count in addition to the, what I'll call primary building footprint,
Right.
total building.
Right.
Other questions, comments? Commissioner Jones, and then Commissioner Lever.
This is Commissioner Jones. I was hoping that staff could maybe respond to what Commissioner Westerbeck said, because, and again, you could tell that I'm always trying to understand where the numbers came from. It's always that sort of why the rationale for that. And so I would love to hear your feedback related to what Commissioner Westerbeck said.
Yeah, I mean, the proposed coverage allowances increased at what seemed a reasonable amount to accommodate the density. I think, like most of what we're doing here, we are basing it on development assumptions, the likelihood of site being developed at the proposed height, the proposed coverage, and being able to achieve those densities for those targets. Should we start to see development activity not, or maybe run into whether it's the height issue, whether it's height or it's setbacks or it's coverage over and over and over again, that's where we would find that rub of, well, maybe we need to explore that and look at, the stormwater, tree canopy, and coverage, and study that and evaluate, well, what is the most critical, what can be flexed in a future code. So zoning codes are malleable over time, and they do change as new technologies come about, as new standards come about that everyone has to meet, whether it's new energy efficiency building codes, or stormwater standards, or tree canopy goals that will come out of the urban forestry management plan. So how do they all align together? So it's not a complete answer, but it is, sort of, this is what we think is going to provide the best chance for achieving that density. And then should we need to adjust within, at the 5-year mark or prior to, depending on how things are going, we will evaluate that.
Other commissioner comments, questions? Commissioner Westerbeck.
Commissioner Westerbeck again. Sorry, just to refer back to my point and also Commissioner Jones. I mean, these probably began, I imagine, again, decades and decades and decades ago. Someone decided it was preferable that they have a lot of green around the house and they're set back a ways, and you only put so much structure on each lot. So it seems like these are legacy codes, and we're inching them up out of necessity, but really they're tied back to decisions we made decades and decades and decades ago, likely when we started with, 25% lot coverage or something like that. At some point, maybe in the 70s or 80s, I don't know. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, Commissioner Jones, but it makes me wonder too. I'm constantly wondering, like, where do these come from? And I think I know the answer because I've researched it for years, but most of these were handed down, they started in New York in 1919, whatever, and then they get added to and adjusted, and okay, now the LA's got its own version, and so cities adopt them and they tweak them and everything. And I'm not unaware that our staff here know all about this, but I think it's good for us to question those assumptions and wonder where they come from, and if just bumping them up is enough, or if we're re-questioning the whole concept of where they came from.
Commissioner Jones and Commissioner Lever.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Westerbeck, and thank you to staff for the clarification. I just want to build on. Well, first, I just want to say I really appreciate all the work that's been done by staff, and I know you're running against a deadline, and so this is probably not the time, and I'm not suggesting it's the time to sort of rethink or present us additional information, but I just wanted to offer maybe something to consider for the next time. Once we get past the deadlines and we're looking at some other things, some of your optional items, something like this, it would really help the average citizen to understand how you model this to come up with the numbers. Because to the layperson, it seems like an incremental approach, recognizing these are legacy. These probably came from a different concept of what Bothell would look like. And I think what we're aiming for here is something really transformational. And when we just see numbers that maybe change by a few percentages here or there along columns, it's hard to understand the rationale for where they came from. Like, how did we pick 45%? How did we pick 50%? How does this work with all of the other types of guidelines? It would really help to understand the modeling behind it, to see something in something that gives us a sense of what this might look like. And again, I'm not suggesting this for this particular process that we're going through right now, because I know we have a deadline. But I think it would help the public in the future. So again, just offering it as feedback.
Thank you. Commissioner Lever.
I just want to second that I'm in agreement with what I'm hearing around making changes that will remove historical barriers for affordable housing or just to increase access to our neighborhoods. And moving forward, really understanding whether or not we don't need to go into that anymore, but like really hearing there are other regulations that are already in code that would allow us to handle the stormwater management and all of that, then not quite really following the methodology. And at the end of the day is when we are trying to advocate for the work that we're doing here, it's really difficult to have a little pitch on the why. So I just wanted to second what I'm hearing and really interested in removing any unnecessary barriers that have kept us apart.
Other commissioner comments, questions? Seeing none?
Can I make one note on the coverage?
Certainly.
I was double checking that this was included in the update from March, but when you did the middle housing update, I believe you also are allowed to increase the coverage amounts by 10% for duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. So there is some also kind of additional incentive to encourage those slightly increased densities, some of which can be more affordable. I'm not saying they all are, but so there's some incentives in there to help reduce the barriers that lot coverage and hard surface coverage or building coverage and lot coverage can impose.
All right, so moving along.
All right. Setbacks were next. On the 3rd, thinking back, there didn't seem to be any concerns regarding the drafted setbacks for front, side, or rear. The questions came up from City Council around the front setback and why is it still retaining the 20-foot for the garage doors for the front while the remainder of the home could project forward. Staff's response was that needing enough room for a vehicle to be parked on site in order to not hang in the right of way, that includes the sidewalk. So we are measuring from the property line, not from the street or from the from anywhere forward of the property line. And just wanted to make sure that Planning Commission was in agreement with the proposed reduction for the remaining portion of the home. So living space can be pulled forward, creating some flexibility within a lot, while still we haven't touched parking. We are planning to look at parking standards in the future, but that is would be a big task at this point to reevaluate the required on-site parking standards for residential sites. And to note, most of these multifamily, they may have parking garages with those higher densities, so queuing and space to be pulling in from the right-of-way where there may be a garage door that has to either go up to allow multiple vehicles to come in is what staff's proposing. On the rear yard setback, there was a question about, are there any alleys that might impact these types of projects? We were planning on keeping it in just because who knows what type of development might be proposed. Someone may propose to install an alleyway that could have a zero setback for structures. There are some alleys within a few areas of town, not too many, but just not knowing what the future may bring for development sites. We were planning on leaving it in, so just wanted to make sure there was clarity on these two with the Planning Commission.
Commissioner Westerbeck.
No one else? Okay. You always know I'm going to have comments on this. Can you go back one slide? Yeah. So I watched with great interest. I sat through the whole council meeting, watched it in person. I definitely sympathized with and understood what the mayor was saying about the 20-foot driveway and, let people decide. The only thing that gives me pause is I'm also someone who sees a lot of people do this on social media too. They take pictures of people parking over the sidewalk. And I know that's trying to avoid that. So I can understand it for that reason. I'm glad that if you don't have a garage, you can be closer. I mean, I would probably say front yard setback. To me, it's one of the most useless setbacks. I mean, I think it could be 5 feet. And really, side setbacks could be 3. In the old days, 3 was really common. And today, with 3 is about the minimum you can get variance for, because you have to do a 1 hour rated wall. And you can have up to 25% openings, I think, of windows and doors. So I would be for dropping that down to 3 feet, knowing that they have to adhere to building code and do a 1 hour, or even do an option, say 5, but 3 foot optional with a 1 hour rated wall. Because again, building code covers setbacks. We put it in land use, I think, again, to make people feel good about their suburban, neighborhoods and stuff, and that's just where it came from. So, but we're trying to densify, and so reducing some of those barriers and allowing people some opportunity to exercise choice and use their land the way they would like is something we should at least consider. Even if we're not going to do it now, this is maybe something next year we look at. And I agree with Commissioner Jones with the lot percentage coverages and stuff. I don't, and we've got to get this done. I understand. I don't think you should make changes, but I hope we're putting this into the notes for when we do crack open the code later iterations that we're thinking about this. So this is maybe something we can percolate on. But these again are, we cover this in the building code. So the 20 foot though, I'd love to see garages tucked around back. I would love to see the return of the alley in developers who are doing single family homes. But that might be too much to hope for. But a grid of streets and alleys would be wonderful, and we can put the garages around back. Maybe we can incentivize that or encourage that in a future code. We'll see. Thanks.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none.
All right. The last thing that we discussed with City Council was primarily on floor area ratio within these overlays. So to recap the overlays here, these align with the future land use map. These were included in order to achieve the jobs numbers as well as residential throughout areas like Midtown, North Creek, Canyon Park. The question around FAR came up, and is it another limitation, limiting factor? Most jurisdictions have floor area ratios in conjunction with height. A lot of it has to do with just establishing what massing looks like. Staff plan these are right out of our code. Just, if we had an unlimited FAR, for example, that would mean if you had an FAR of 5 or 3, in one of these zones, or higher, it depends, because some of the designated centers actually have FARs higher than these, but 3 would be 3 stories, corner to corner, side, setback to setback on a site. And so by establishing an FAR, you can stack them and create some variability in building design. And it's relatively standard. And I think, part of it is just the avoidance of 3 stories of a building built to the setbacks with no interest in design, and trying to look for ways in which that it could be consolidated into a taller structure. Again, it'd still have to comply with stormwater standards and all of those things. So the likelihood that anyone would ever do 3 stories, or if their FAR is higher, is not that likely. FAR does not count with covered parking. So if there were a parking garage that was a floor, that could also increase that massing. So just wanted to make sure there weren't any questions or concerns based on kind of how the question around eliminating a proposed FAR came up. And it is always, it's like most of these things, we could study it for a year and evaluate what is the best way to guide development types. But it's been a pretty standard use for commercial development, so not residential, not the zones we were looking at prior to this.
Yeah, Commissioner Westbeck here. Just a point of clarification. It's the only part, is it Canyon Park and North Creek, the only places we have FAR? Because we don't have it downtown. I think it's, from my recollection, maybe there's other areas, but,
I believe so. I'd have to double check that, but
and that's mostly because it's institutional, commercial, the more, yeah, less housing. Okay, yeah. Because I reviewed these and I thought, oh, for a while I had to study a little bit and understand, okay, we do have some FAR is the primary mechanism here, so that's good. Because I think FAR is fine, but it's when it's overlaid with setbacks, and of course height makes sense because you can make a story 30 feet if you really wanted to. So deciding that you're going to have a height limit makes some sense there. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify. So far, it hasn't expanded beyond those zones for the city of Bothell. Okay.
Other commissioner questions or comments? Seeing none?
okay. The last two slides, really just a discussion around the future land use map and what those zones will be. So we're building out the zoning map, but the next two slides reflect what those changes will be. And we've discussed this before, but just want to make sure that it happens again. So if there is a area of town that is being redesignated to the residential medium, that could include medium 1 through 4. We would look at what the current zoning designation is and apply that associated new zoning type. So just, that there's a lot of different little bits and pieces of zones. The southernmost portion, I'd say, of the city, right above the word Kirkland, that is currently R7200. That would be redesignated to the RM2, and so on. And then within the commercial overlays, these overlay designations would be applied to the to those areas of town. In the purples, the red, there's only a few of those, and then the blue, employment medium. So those are those 5 overlays that will eventually become zones. But that was a big lift right at this point to clean up some of the alphabet soup of zoning and overlays. So that's a phase 2 next year project.
Comments?
Just
Commissioner Westerweg?
Commissioner Westbury, just a comment of thanks, because I've been dealing with this code for a long time, and yeah, it was complicated, so the simplification is appreciated.
Great. And we're looking forward to that zoning map being wrapped up. So our plan at this point, so our calendar, we've got November 5th, City Council study session to go through what we've talked about tonight, bringing back to the City Council that final list of code amendments. We will then have the public hearing with the Planning Commission on November 6th. And, sorry, wrong button. Then on the 19th, we've got a public hearing with City Council. The following evening would be where the findings, conclusions, and recommendations would be put together with the Planning Commission. We can build off of the FCRs from the preferred alternative and utilize that for the comp plan portion of it, and then establish probably a separate one, because it will be nice to have a separate finding, conclusion, and recommendation for the associated zoning regulations. And then that can be provided to council as part of their final adoption on December 10th, as far as the projected schedule. So.
Okay.
So we just want to make sure any feedback, any other questions on the draft code that was within the packet, trying to make it really easy to sort of page through those and see where those code changes are. All of them ripple effects of going through the zones, making sure that we've updated those and included the new definitions. And staff will be running through those again, just to make sure we didn't pull a string from one code section and it created a problem somewhere else. And if we do find any of those, we'll spotlight those for everyone.
Commissioner Sills.
Along those lines, once we have something in place, is there a way, and because I'm one of the newer ones here, is there a way we're tracking what happens? Like, are we able to see, like, where that development is happening? What are the different land use that was appealing, or, and going back to all the different building coverage and things like that? Like, how can we measure that over time, and what's like a realistic amount of time to look for that feedback?
So as part of the implementation element, we have to be monitoring and tracking the growth throughout the city and illustrating, and I don't know if the guidance is within currently established, but what we'll have to report out on in 5 years' time to Commerce to show where we are at that midpoint between the next 10-year comprehensive plan major update. So we'll be looking through that, and as developments happen, staff are always communicating with each other jurisdictions through working groups, through Northwest APA, and from Commerce, seminars, webinars, everything that we all do along the sidelines, making sure we're tracking and seeing what happens if we're not seeing development happen like other cities in our same situation might be. What did they do? What are all the lessons learned? There'll be a lot of lessons learned coming out of all this work that other jurisdictions that are on the next year cycle will be looking to see how we got it right or wrong or somewhere in between. So we will be monitoring how development activity takes place and how we see those units developed.
And that's primarily through permitting and things like that.
Yes.
And so we'll be able to see like what permits are being approved and for what, and kind of gauge from that what's happening.
Yeah.
And at what like time interval are we talking about though? Because you mentioned 5 years, but like, is that something we can see on a quarterly basis? To
give you some perspective on it, so the middle housing code went into effect back in, was it March? And we are just starting to see some of those projects make it through pre-application steps and building permit submittal. So a development cycle can take a couple years for acquisition of a property after kind of kicking the tires, making sure, is this something I want to purchase and build on based on what they're seeing as the opportunity. And so it can then be 6 months to a year for permitting to take place, land use permitting. There's usually some overlap with building permit review. So it could be anywhere from 1 to 2 years before we start to see development breaking ground with this new code. Could be a little faster depending on the savviness or experience of a developer. And then, so.
I just want to also note that like permit and production trends are sent to OFM each year. So I think that is tracked and available, whether, I don't know, I'm not speaking on staff's behalf for when that comes to you in any format, but that is available. And then that 5-year report has some key things that you do have to look at around mostly the availability and affordability of housing. If that's had any kind of change based on how the comp plan has been implemented, permit processing timelines, and then the other one is around VMT and GHG reductions. So there are a few required pieces in that, but then there's some flexibility in kind of the other pieces that the city chooses to monitor and report on to see how the comp plan is being implemented.
Just to follow, so it'll be hard to tell if the results are due to the state law changing or what we're doing here, right? Because it will all kind of flow together.
Well,
Unless city by city, there's a difference.
yeah, I mean, we will be able to recognize what is a different product than what would have been allowed under the current code. So seeing a higher density multifamily building go in where it might have only been a duplex, triplex at most under current code. So we will be able to track that. Like we are looking at middle housing, we want to make sure we are recognizing those that utilize the middle housing code, those that are looking to develop with affordable units. And then through the housing action plan, we will be looking at tracking affordable housing units and how we're achieving these goals.
In the appendix I think it's Appendix B for the comp plan, looks at production trends since 2010 or 11. It depends on the graphic I'm looking at. But at least the last 10 years, it looks at production trends in Bothell. And so you'll have some historical comparison there too.
Okay, so onto the code.
Yeah, any comments on throughout the code?
I've actually got some nits to pick. Probably more typos than anything.
Those are great.
Anyone else have anything? I'll just dive in. I look at page 44, kitchen, any room used or intended, designed for preparation and storage of food, contains any two of the following. Now, of those two, it says an appliance for cooking or heating of food, comma, a range. Those seem like the same thing.
This has come up over and over again with, what constitutes a kitchen.
Yeah.
Often it was the creating an accessory dwelling unit or a separate dwelling unit that we wanted to make sure was or was not allowed. And we're seeing it more and more when ADUs are allowed, citywide. So we're wanting to make sure that a development unit, whether the current owner plans on using it as a accessory dwelling unit or just another area of the home or a detached space, they're around for a long time, and we don't know who might be utilizing them. So we're just looking to make sure we provide clarity. That was pulled from the Snohomish County definition for a kitchen, kind of actually merged the Snohomish County and King County definitions a little bit to make sure that we're capturing really anything that could be utilized for cooking and looking around the state and the country for other ways to do that. As there are a lot of plug-in devices that can provide for.
Seems like a range is an appliance for cooking, so I wondered that.
Okay.
The other thing I wondered was, okay, any two of the following, a kitchen-type sink and a 220 outlet. Seems to me there are some laundry rooms that might fall into there.
That's possible, yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of wonder if that gets you where you want to be with those two. The other nit I had was, let's see, 216. What did I say? Oh, I said, in the title, delete the word overlay. Why did I say that? 12.04, 100. Okay, let's get to there. Yeah, you deleted overlay here, but you didn't delete it there.
Noted, thank you.
Can you tell I was a bureaucrat? 231, another incomplete deletion. 1206-070K. All right. So you deleted the first part and you left the bottom half of the line.
And I think that was actually part of the footer that we were trying to remove from the document. So it's actually not a strike through. It is there.
Okay.
Because it's not red. If it were red, then it would be a deletion, but it's sort of the upper bar of the footer.
Oh, okay, so that bar is in the wrong place?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, all right. I was confused by that. Those are the ones I picked out. Anyone else? I tried to catch the red, but that one black one kind of jumped out at me. Because it was on a page with red on it, which is why I got it. All right, seeing no others, I guess you have no more comments on the draft zoning regulations.
Okay,
Does that bring our study session to a close?
sounds like it.
All right. Next item, reports from members. Any updates from our members? Looking around the table. Seeing none. We have a report from staff, a Public Works memo response regarding the transportation element. Deputy Director Morikawa will speak to this.
Okay.
No, you're fine. I just need to gather all of my mess of.
In response to your written comments to the council, I mean, after the discussion about transportation, which is a difficult discussion, and if you were there at the council meeting, it was the same difficult discussion, and staff has a difficult time with it as well. So what we're trying to do is essentially try to wrap this up and summarize where we are and likely where the staff proposes to leave it. And I think the next step, I don't know if the council is going to address it before they go through their public hearing and talk about it, but we heard some things from the council that seems to say it's about where it needs to be. So what I wanted to do was get back to you and kind of respond to some of your concerns. So in the sense of the 214th Street and 20th Street, those are the streets that we're going to extend in Canyon Park because we need more connectivity and we're concerned about environmental impacts. We will write a statement essentially in the comprehensive plan that says the desire is to readdress it at some point. The most appropriate time would be to reopen the Canyon Park sub-area plan. When that gets revisited or refreshed, we would do that. I also wanted to let you know that in the Canyon Park plan, when we talked to the 9th Avenue community, there were concerns about connecting up to it with 214th before doing improvements on 9th. So we specifically wrote in there that we would do that. We could not attach 214th until we improve 9th. And so that project already is secondary to 9th Avenue. And we're just starting the design of one phase of 9th. And you know how that goes. It's a big project. We'll design a phase right away, build it. So it's likely to take the first 10 years or so before we even go to 214th. So there'll be time. In terms of 228th, that's the harder one. What we did was we did write in the description of the project that we will look at areas that we don't touch because they currently have a sidewalk and an in-street bike lane, and we will do as much as we can to protect and buffer those areas, understanding the cost of not redoing that whole frontage, essentially. There was an input from somebody that made a suggestion, which was interesting. do as much as you can in the local area and complete it for that $100 million. And I think the suggestion was do it around Bothell Highway. And that's actually a solid idea. That's actually where staff started. But one of the things that if we do that is there are currently sidewalks there. And although we don't want in-street bike lanes, there are in-street bike lanes there. If we do that and spend all our resources there, there are no sidewalks on to the further east and the further west. I think staff thought it was preferable to get the sidewalks in on both sides throughout the whole corridor, have a bike facility, half protected, half maybe buffered or as best we can, versus really nice stuff in the center. And on the ends where we have communities that actually need the sidewalks, nothing there. So right now, I think we're gonna stick with the proposal. I will tell you that one of the things we plan to do, and I think it's in the CFP, is put some planning money into that 228th. Because one of the things right now is we have planning level estimates. We really got to get into more details to see how much it really costs and everything. So we want to do that over the next few years, and that might give us the opportunity to see what more we could do. So I think staff has heard you, but I think for now, I think we're going to leave it where we recommended it. And then the last one was shared use path versus separated facilities. And again, we heard you, and we will use that sparingly. I think we will leave it for 214th and 20th right now, because if for some reason we do get those things in the later years of the 20 years, it would save quite a bit and reduce impacts to the environment. But my suspicion is we will be readdressing those two projects anyway. So it kind of makes the financial plan work for the 20 years at this point. And again, we can reassess in a few years. And that's what we wanted to get back to you with. And I think when your memo goes to the council, the staff memo will go with it. So hopefully it kind of resolves everything.
So before I ask for questions, I'd like to thank you for being as responsive as you are to the questions we raised. And we appreciate you coming back and addressing them directly to us. So thank you for that. So any other comments from commissioners? Seeing none, thank you again. We appreciate you coming here. Any other reports from staff?
Not at this time. Nope.
All right, then. There being no further business, is there a motion to adjourn? Commissioner Robson.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Commissioner Lever, second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned at 7:13. Our next meeting will be November 6th. Thank you all.
Thank you.